So we talked about with Ali Vitale the House. Let's move to the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer made it clear yesterday he is standing by the president, telling reporters, quote, "As I've said before, I'm for Joe." However, a number of other Democratic senators are couching their support. President pro tem of the Senate, Senator Patty Murray of Washington, issued a statement yesterday, reading in part, quote, "We need to see a much more forceful and energetic candidate on the campaign trail in the very near future in order for him to convince voters he's up to the job." Senator Jon Tester of Montana, who's in a very close Senate race, released a statement which reads in part, "President Biden has got to prove to the American people, including me, that he's up to the job for another 4 years." Similar statements were also released by Senators Sherrod Brown of Ohio and Martin Heinrich of New Mexico, two Democrats from states with large Republican bases. Brown briefly spoke with reporters.
Voters have a lot of legitimate questions in Ohio. That's what I hear.
Do you have questions?
Voters have legitimate questions about this. Voters have legitimate questions about all of this.
Senator Joe Manchin, who is not running for re-election, gave a more nuanced response.
The senators who are up for election, they're going to have a lot of input. We're anxious to hear from them and anxious to hear from their conversation with the president if they've had that.
Yeah, but
and we'll just see what happens. I think this week is going to play out. I think everyone just calms down a little bit and waits for this week. My main concern was the health and well-being of the president. He said everything's fine, so let's see how that goes this week.
Yesterday, Senate Democrats were supposed to meet yesterday to discuss whether to support President Biden. Instead, all Senate Democrats will gather today for their regularly scheduled caucus meeting. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, who was spearheading yesterday's meeting, appears to have backed off his criticism.
Most important thing we can do is defeat Donald Trump. If we don't do that, we will set back America a generation. And, I'm looking forward to the chance to talk face-to-face with my colleagues. I tell you, I've had tough campaigns during my time. And sometimes asking questions, at least in my case, made me a better campaigner. And I think a lot of folks are raising some questions. They need to get asked. But at the end of the day, we got to beat Donald Trump.
So that last line is the most important one. They got to beat Donald Trump. And for me, listening to those Democrats, even those who think Joe Biden perhaps should step down, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. Whether they think Joe Biden should step down or not, it is an opportunity to talk about how strong this presidency has been, what an incredible team is in this administration, and how Democrats moving forward should be not only banking on that success, but building upon it. There is a long list, Lauren Leader, of historic accomplishments out of this presidency, and it just seems like some of these Democrats are playing small ball with sort of day trading minute by minute, quite frankly, like Republicans do. Instead of the big picture and the strength of this party, the strength of this presidency, and why we might want to save democracy.
Right. And it's incredible that we're now, 5-6 days from the Republican National Convention. There is no Republican vice president that Trump has selected. The Republicans released their platform yesterday, which has some, really extraordinary, and I use that word gently, extraordinary platforms. They've tried to eliminate abortion from their overall platform, but replaced it essentially with the 14th Amendment, which sets up a, big conversation about the Republican commitment to sort of fetal personhood. I mean, the list goes on. And I think every member of Congress that gets asked about the president at this point needs to be turning the conversation to talk about what's happening on the other side, and also to reinforce why the president's views and the president's policies are more aligned with the majority of Americans, certainly, than Trump's. And they need to be talking about that day in and day out. It's also about their own legacies. And a big part of this is going to speak to whether or not they can get reelected, guys like Sherrod Brown and others who supported the most popular parts of the president's agenda, including the infrastructure bill, et cetera. So they need to turn these conversations around. The president's answered the question. So every day that we keep doing this, they're dragging themselves down.
I agree completely. I really think that whatever questions they have, when they are in front of reporters and cameras, there's an opportunity there to talk about the strength of the party and the strength of this presidency, and it's being missed every time for day trading.
Did you hear what Jim Clyburn said?
Yeah.
Talking about Project 2025, and Ashley, that obviously is an issue that Democrats are really focused on. Donald Trump, obviously, they've done the polling and they see how poorly all the items rate with voters. And so he said, I have no idea who they are. Of course,
right, okay.
He's not telling the truth
Pathological
there. And then
liar.
from the pictures and the press reports, they have a pretty big footprint at the RNC this coming week. So talk about what the Republicans want to focus on at the convention, what we can expect them to focus on, and what the platform what it suggests.
Well, one thing that's been interesting is that President Trump himself has displayed a rare bit of discipline in allowing the Democrats to be in disarray. And he is just as happy to do exactly what Mika is warning Democrats not to do, to allow them to sort of day trade bit by bit on should Joe Biden step aside. Would Vice President Harris be a good replacement, or does she have problems too? So that's what we're seeing in the run up to the convention. Of course, at the convention, one thing worth noting is Trump sort of was denied that moment he really wanted of just pure triumph at his first convention in 2016. You may recall Senator Ted Cruz pulled a stunt on the floor with his delegates. And so one thing Trump himself likely wants is sort of just 4 days and 4 nights of ratings and buzz and triumph. And to have the emphasis be on his policies and himself and maybe his running mate if he's chosen them by then, which we expect he will have, but not necessarily some of these themes that the Democrats want to highlight, like when he said he would be a dictator on day one, like what he did on January 6th. So it's both what he wants to highlight and what he does not want to come up.
But I think, Joe, that really the people in the Democratic caucus that keep raising issues about the president are playing into their own challenges, their own competitors for their race. They ought to be running on what the party has done under this president and on Project 2025. Because they risk, as long as they make Donald Trump the issue, they risk even some of those that are facing some insurgents trying to take them out. You can't run on the president at the head of the ticket needs to go and not impact your own race congressionally, because your local constituents want to know, well, what have you done? And you can't answer that by saying, what I've done is try to get the head of the ticket to step aside. It's not an appealing message.
Right. And to be
Lauren,
clear,
later,
I don't know. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Go
I was
ahead,
just going to
go
say,
ahead.
I don't know how disciplined the president's actually being. I mean, we love to say that. He's been playing golf for nine straight days. So, you know, look, you've got one candidate who's out barnstorming the country, trying to bring their message. And I've been critical of the president's campaign style. I do think they need to have a clearer message about what they're going to do in the second term, so that it's not just about prosecuting Donald Trump and, you know, not just talking about the past, but the future. I think that's critical. But you got one candidate that's campaigning and the other one who's been playing golf for 9 straight days. So, you know, I don't know how much discipline that really speaks of the president, and we'll see, you know, of the former president, and we'll see what happens next week. There's no question that a lot of the Republican platform, when Americans start to hear it and start to really look at it, I think it's going to raise a lot of concerns. It is out of touch with the mainstream of what Americans want.
And the parallel you make of the golfing president versus the working president, I mean, you could go a lot deeper and further with that, Lauren. You've got one president who's a proven fraudster, liable for sexual abuse. The list goes on, a convicted felon. All of that. But most importantly, you have editorial pages across the country asking Joe Biden to step down, but they won't ask the guy who just the other night refused to accept the outcome of this coming election. Okay, I don't know what makes him disqualifiable. Apparently, to most editorial boards across the country, that's not, and I don't get it.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.